All right, welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're literally throwing out the biological rulebook. For decades, we've been taught to view our bodies as these really simple ledgers, like just a basic math problem of inputs and outputs. But what if we completely shifted that perspective? What if, instead of a basic calculator, your body is actually this highly complex, predictive biological ecosystem? So let's explore how history, calories, and stress prove that the systems of our health are just far more fascinating than simple addition and subtraction. Okay, let's dive into this. We so often picture the human body as a simple ledger, the classic calories in, calories out model. It's arithmetic. But there's a completely different way to understand it. The body as an ecosystem, one that is adaptive, predictive, and constantly being tuned by its own history. So the big question we're answering today is this: is human health really just simple arithmetic, or is it a highly predictive ecosystem that actually learns from its environment? Well, to find out, we have to look back at one of the darkest periods of the 20th century. Section 1. The Accidental Laboratory. Now, this brings us to a stark and honestly severe historical event that inadvertently became a massive laboratory for human adaptation. In the winter of 1944 and 1945, the Western Netherlands experienced what is now known as the Dutch Hunger Winter. Rail blockades, frozen canals, and war all combined to create this profound scarcity. People were surviving on literal starvation rations. Infants and children were continuing to develop while their world narrowed down to just cold and hunger. And pregnant bodies endured conditions that frankly no modern ethics board would ever permit today. But decades later, scientists returned to this historically bounded severe insult. Because it happened in a specific time and place with a very well-documented population, it created a really rare natural experiment. Scientists could actually measure the long-term health traces left by this extreme early life exposure. And the findings from studying these survivors, they were incredibly striking. A 2022 study by Ramirez and Haas showed that the famine didn't just cause one uniform syndrome. No way. Instead, they found wildly different or heterogeneous effects depending on the exact timing of the starvation and the person's sex. For instance, exposure in utero led to physical health harms later on, while exposure in adolescence actually showed more resilience in late-life physical health, but greater socioeconomic vulnerability. So this gives us two totally valid but contrasting ways to read the famine. Is it a clear single cause where starvation simply equals disease? Or is it a complex systems lesson, showing how our bodies adapt differently based on variables like developmental state and sex? Section 2. The Limits of Linear Causes. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how we often make a false choice in modern health discourse, right? We pit linear causes against complex systems, as if one just absolutely has to defeat the other. Let's look at the calorie model to understand this. If you put a person in a controlled metabolic ward, constrain all the variables, and monitor their activity, a calorie behaves exactly like a linear cause. Actually, it's highly legible in that setting. The math just works. But step into the outside world, and that linear cause completely shatters. Suddenly, a calorie is entangled with a messy web of real-life variables: your sleep quality, your history of trauma, poverty, shift work, artificial light, and your gut microbiota. Public health researchers point out that framing health as just a calorie is a calorie completely obscures how our hormones actually regulate that energy, and it totally ignores the massive metabolic effects of food quality. To really make sense of this entanglement, think of your metabolism as a house being built. Yes, calories absolutely matter. They are the labor force, the pure energy input. But come on, a house requires so much more than just workers. You need tools and raw materials, which are your micronutrients. You need supervisors to direct the labor, which are your hormones and nervous system. You're building on a foundation and blueprints laid down by genetics and early development, and the whole shebang is happening within a specific climate or external environment. The single-cause calorie model isn't entirely wrong. It just treats the body like a passive container, rather than the actively regulated ecosystem that this house model illustrates. Section 3. The Body as a Tuned System. So this brings us to a really profound realization. Scarcity during the Dutch famine didn't just passively damage developing bodies. It actively informed them. It tuned them. We call this parametric variation. Instead of looking at a body and saying its biological architecture is fundamentally broken or defective, we need to realize that shared biological systems are just tuned differently under pressure. Scarcity teaches the body something. It might alter expectations about energy storage, immune vigilance, or insulin sensitivity. A body built for conservation during a famine is acting brilliantly. But if that same differently tuned body is later placed in an environment of modern abundance, Well, that protective calibration suddenly becomes costly. It's kind of like downloading a software update meant for the desert, but you live in a swamp. The code isn't broken. It's just running the wrong program for your current environment. And this brilliantly illustrates a concept called equifinality. Because our bodies are these complexly tuned ecosystems, many different pathways can converge on the exact same symptom or diagnosis. Think of a child showing severe gastrointestinal symptoms or sleep disruption. One child might arrive at those symptoms through a chronic infection. Another might arrive there through sensory mismatch, poverty, or repeated social exclusion. Completely different initial stressors, but the exact same clinical outcome.
Conversely, we have multifinality. This is where the exact same stressor leads to wildly divergent outcomes. The Dutch hunger winter is the prime example here. One specific stressor, severe famine, led to entirely different later life outcomes depending on whether the exposure happened in utero or during adolescence. So to sum that up visually, we have equifinality, which is many stressors funneling into one single outcome, and multifinality, where one stressor explodes into many different outcomes. If you only rely on simplistic, linear, single-cause medical models, you are going to be completely lost in ordinary, complex life, because you will just miss the intricate web of these pathways.
Section 4, Stress as the Weather. Now, let's shift our focus away from dramatic historical famines and look at the everyday, the recurring, small mismatches that are actually shaping most of our lives right now. There's a brilliant saying in systems theory. In complex systems, causes do not always behave like bullets. They behave like weather. Everyday stressors aren't direct, simple bullets. They're cumulative. They're interactive. A small pressure might have zero effect on you today, but a massive effect tomorrow, depending on the state of your system. Think about your own everyday ecology for a second. Germs aren't just pathogens. They are your microbial exposures and immune education. Fats aren't just calories. They form your cell membranes and interact with your inflammatory load. And sunlight disruptions aren't just a lack of vitamin D. Artificial light at night disrupts your sleep timing. Yes, looking at your phone in bed actually changes your biology. Look at clinical trials. When people are fed ultra-processed diets, they consume more energy and gain weight, even when the meals are perfectly matched for calories and macronutrients. Why? Because food texture, processing, and neurohormonal responses literally change the system's pathway. Much like a house rotting over time from poor ventilation and moisture, these seemingly trivial daily disruptions accumulate and cause complex biological systems to fail. Section 5, Redefining the Medical Model. So, where does this leave modern medicine? To be clear, this explainer is absolutely not anti-medical. It is anti-collapse. We need to redefine our approach, using an evolutionary stress framework. And to do this, we really must split the medical model into two sides. On one hand is pathology care. This is what medicine is incredible at, treating acute injury, infection, malignancy, and pain. It asks, what is dangerous right now? But on the other hand is pathology interpretation. This asks, what does this pattern actually mean? Is it an adaptation, a mismatch, a trade-off? Modern medicine often misinterprets interpretation. It looks at a body that has been uniquely tuned by historical stress and immediately labels it as intrinsically defective. It sees a symptom and mistakes the name of the symptom for the root cause. A much better interpretation requires understanding allostatic load. This is the cumulative biological cost when your adaptive stress systems are constantly activated just to keep you stable. In the short term, stress adaptation is brilliantly protective. But when those regulatory systems are overused over time, the cost is tissue damage, inflammation, and exhaustion. Think of it like swiping a biological credit card to get through a crisis. Eventually, the bill comes due with interest. Your body isn't morally weak or broken. It might just be carrying the heavy cost of having adapted entirely too well to the wrong conditions. Let's move to and see how this builds into a really practical 3-layer medical model. Step 1 is the biomedical pathology layer. We absolutely keep this. We need to treat acute diseases and injuries. Step 2 is the adaptive regulatory layer. This is where we look at how your metabolic and immune systems have been tuned over time by your personal history and allostatic load. And finally, step 3 is the participation and ecology layer. This addresses the external environment, social determinants, poverty, light environments, and our food systems. You simply cannot look at the illness in layer 1 without looking at the tuning in layer 2 and the environment in layer 3. So the crucial point is this. In an old single-cause model, heterogeneity, the fact that people respond so differently to the exact same stress, is just seen as an annoying nuisance. But in a systems model, heterogeneity is the map. The widely varied outcomes of those Dutch hunger winter survivors weren't just statistical noise. They were vital biological information showing exactly how development, sex, and timing tune the human body. Which brings us to a final, pretty profound question to leave you with.
Think about your own health, or the health of someone you care about. Is your diagnosis a fundamental biological defect, or is it actually a brilliant historical adaptation to the wrong environment? Your body keeps the score, but it's for sure not keeping a simple ledger. It is predicting, adapting, and surviving. Thank you so much for joining me in this explainer, and I really hope this changes how you view the incredible ecosystem that is your body.